Bill and I had this idea, that it would be really nice to, as we worked together and did similar things in a very similar style, that it'd be nice to, to have a company, because I had a premises next to a house that I bought, and do something like that and on our own and sort of branch out.
We had moved to a workshop behind Martin's house, which imaginatively we called Bower House, because it was behind Martin Bower's house. And I tried to explain to Martin, some people think it's really magical that it's Bower House, it's a German art movement, but no one ever got that one. And we started and we were on it for about 3.5 months.
Before we'd even got letterheads started, phone rang, it's Nick Alder, and he said, are you guys working on anything at the moment? And I said, well, we are, but Nick, because I'd worked with Nick Alder on Space 1999. I mean, he was responsible really for a lot of what you see. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant guy, amazingly talented person.
And then we decided to get a partnership together, get a company, because models were big in those days. If we could get together and see what projects might be interested in us. Outland appeared through Nicky Alder talking to Peter Hyams. And Nicky had said to Peter, oh, if you want to do this type of movie, I've got the guys who can actually make the miniatures.
Nick said, I can't do this film, but I've been asked to do a film called Outland. And I said, Outland? I said, well, that doesn't say, is that a space film? He said, yeah, he says, it's a space film. And I couldn't understand. And in fact, nobody ever could work out why it was called Outland. We knew that originally it was called I.O., but Dudley Moore had just made a film called 10, 1-0. And of course, I.O. looks like a 1 and an O, same thing. So they obviously thought of a different title, and they come up with High Noon in Space. Outland. Yes. Outland was very, very similar to Alien in certain in its styling, in as much as they had a designer on it called Philip Harrison, who was obviously very influenced by Alien and used lots of similarity in the set dressing and the things that he did. But the actual refinery came around in a very, very strange way. Normally, as a model maker, you work under the special effects department and under the special effects director. On Outland, it was totally different. I went over to see Peter Hyams, and I didn't know Peter Hyams was a well-known film director. I hadn't seen any of his films. I didn't know his name. And I was shown into this room, and this very, very enthusiastic, quite an overpowering guy, sort of shook my hand and crushed it, and he said, I understand you make models. And I said, yeah. He said, can you build that? And right across the wall of this room where we were was a painting of the Outland refinery, full size, model size. So it was like 27 feet across, something like that. He said, can you build that? And I said, yeah, of course. And he said, how much? And I said, crikey, I'd have to work. He said, oh, come on, cut through all that bullshit. He said, he said, you must know. He said, I know you've done hundreds of models. He said, you must know how much that's going to cost. And I'm thinking in my mind, how on earth do I cost this thing? So I always remembered I'd never used it before, but I remember my grandpa saying to me, always think of a figure and double it, because it's always going to be loads of things you never thought of. And this stuck for some reason, it really stuck in my mind. And so I gave him a figure, and he said, great, okay. He said, take this ticket, go over to the office of Charles Orme, who's in the main building, and he'll give you a cheque for some money up front. And I said, oh, okay, right, fine. And I'm thinking, I said, is it what you give me half? And he just said, half in advance. He said, I'll give you a third now, a third when we're a third of the way through, and the end when you complete it. He said, but there may also be a shuttlecraft to do as well. Long and the short of it was, and then he said, oh, and you've got 4 months to build it in. Kind of felt like I was being carried along and hardly having time to think. But I'd seen this picture. What he hadn't told me was that we were going to be given drawings. Well, when I seen Charles Orme, I was told that phone rang and they said, you need to go and see a guy called Philip Harrison, who's the set designer. And I'm thinking, I thought I was just coming over here for 5 minutes, but like I've been here 2 hours, Went to see Philip Harrison and they were starting to do these really intricate drawings of all of these things. And I said, forgive me. I said, please don't think, I don't want to influence you or anything. I said, but if you do drawings like that and you want us to follow drawings like that, it'll take us 4 years to build that refinery, not 4 months. I said, because we have got to use everything that's available. And he said, I've never met a designer who's a model maker who's a designer. And I said, well, you have now. I said, because I designed most of the models I did for Space 1999. And I don't want to sound like a big head, but, we don't really need that. I said, if you give us artist's impressions of what you want, how about we build you one of the modules? If you don't like it, you can tell us where to go, and if you do like it, you can use it in the film. And he said, okay. I've talked to Peter about it, but long and the short of it was, barely got back. I've shown this check to Bill, and Bill sort of finding it very hard to contain himself, and I'm thinking the same thing. Well, this is one of the Pauls.
We looked at it and thought, wow, this is quite big. The art department hadn't come up with a lot of designs, so we went in, we visited them at Pinewood, and it was a case of, when do you want it for? And it was about 3.5 months to make a 20-foot long refinery. So we said, we can do it.
And the sketches that we'd got from Peter Hyams, the Lad Company, it was Peter Hyams, and he actually dealt directly with him. I mean, I didn't work with John Steers at all, really, which was very unusual. We proceeded to make this thing, and it was all modules. There were 2 greenhouses that were about 6 feet high, which had to be made in mirrored perspex. There was this huge thing they called the Pompidou module, and it was called the Pompidou module because it was like the Pompidou Centre in France. And there were also various other buildings, and we built there was a landing pad as well. So the landing pad legs had been done by the art department. They'd actually had made one of these up and had them cast, and then we sort of super detailed them and went over to Pinewood to do those.
Everything in the workshop, everything that we ever bought, and it had been dumped into skips at the end of movies like Alien and Flash Gordon appeared in that. We actually evicted Martin Bower's cat from his cat box, and that is part of the Pompidou building. If you know the film, there's one that looks very much like the Pompidou Centre. So that was Martin's cat box. And then a lot of plastic kit bits stuck to the outside. We were desperate. We hadn't worked for a while. We want to do a good job as usual. That's it. Never let the side down. It was always keep the standard there. Neither Martin nor myself or any of my team have ever gone in and said, oh, let's do it. Let's just throw a piece of junk out. We're all trained as designers. So we don't normally get a load of blueprints and have to make the stuff to the blueprints. We get an idea. We get something written on the back of a postcard.
I remembered this lampshade that I'd used on Space 1999, so I said to Bill, you know, those generators that are standing on top of the refinery, they really look like that lampshade that I had. And we went into Woolworths in Slough. And I remember, I don't know why it was Slough, but we went into this Woolworths in Slough. And we were driving round trying to find them. And we found 5 of them in this Woolworths in Slough. And anyway, I picked them up, took them to the cash desk, and the lady in the cash desk said to me, she said, "What, if you don't mind me asking, why on earth are you buying 5 lampshades?" I said, if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. And she said, "Well, go on, tell me." I said, "Well, we're actually building a space refinery for a film." She said, "You're right, I don't believe you." When you see Outland, you can see right on the top, you can see these 5 big generator towers, and they're made out of these lampshades. Centres, you know, but subsequently used a couple of the lampshades for flying saucers or rounded shapes as well. You know, nothing was wasted. Didn't throw anything away, and all my friends were under sort of strict instructions. My mum, don't throw any mascara tubes away. Literally, quite literally, don't throw anything away. Nothing. And my mum was great because she had worked in theatre a lot. And my grandfather would encourage me, more than my father really, to do the sort of work that I wanted to do.
The shuttle was Roy and Robbie Scott were making the shuttle within Pinewood. So we were going to have to detail that shuttle that lands near the end. But the whole refinery was us.
All the sections had been taken from my workshop over to Pinewood, distance of about 20 miles, in the back of a Chevrolet Blazer, which was the American car that I happened to have at the time. And it was all assembled on the stage, and before we'd gone, we were called in to see Philip Harrison again. And he said, "This is John Steers." I'd never met John Steers, didn't even know he'd been involved in the film, and because I knew his name from the Bond films. And he said, "You need to talk with John about doing this shuttlecraft that we need." And he said, and Peter Hyams had apparently said he wanted it to look like the Staten Island Ferry. Well, I didn't even know what the Staten Island Ferry was, never mind about the Staten Island Ferry in space, which is what he'd said he wanted. So got given this box, literally this Perspex box, with a metal frame inside it which had the plug points in to mount the model, and was told that we'd had a month to turn this box into a spacecraft. And once again, took it back, spent quite a lot of money buying repetitious kits, because one of the things you need when you've got, for instance, 4 landing legs. Now, on the screen in Outland, there's a close-up of one of the landing legs, and it's filling the screen. It's 5 inches across, that landing leg, right? Well, we didn't know it was going to go that close, but we knew it had to be really close. So we bought these 1/600th scale battleships, particularly HMS Belfast, and we bought like 50 of them, literally 50 of them, so that we could get like a repetitious, just to get the look of the shuttle. We just made it in the same way that I did all the other things. It just sort of came to us, you know. We could kind of, I've always had this idea, this ability to sort of picture in my mind. I mean, I referred earlier to doing drawings for Brian Johnson. In the end, I didn't used to bother with the drawings. I just used to go home and I'd have a picture in my mind. That's why there's so little artwork from them. And I would immediately, also at the time, of course, you know, I would immediately get into making the models, because people would say to me, you know, how much time did you spend like drawing them? And I said, well, usually none. It's only when I needed to order EMA, which is the plastic tubing and parts that I would need. Only then did I do a rough drawing showing the sizes so that I could knew what sizes to order up. And Outland was done in exactly the same way. The shuttle was done. When it was finished, it weighed 45 pounds, and it was only like that long. And it was too much for one person to lift. And we took it over to the studios, and we'd done all this very, very fine detailing on the refinery. Oh, I meant to mention that, of course, we'd made this section that we said we would make. We built this section, highly detailed, it lots of weathering, and you know, made it look really, really nice. Peter Hyams had said, yep, that's exactly the sort of thing I want right now. You can go away and build the rest of it. And so we built the thing, and it was all sort of grey primer and a zinc plate primer. Now, zinc plate primer was used on Alien. That's what's used on Nostromo. That's the colour that Nostromo was. I've seen so many people with Nostromo models painted grey primer. It's not that grey primer. It's not that colour at all. It was much darker. It was zinc plate primer, because you could polish it up and it looks like metal panels. And we used the same zinc plate primer on the refinery for Outland. And Peter was doing tests on this model, and he said, I can't get a depth of field, you know, and he was like sort of looking for somebody to blame, and we went away and went home, and we'd been paid on the spot, true to his word, and we got this phone call back, and they said, guys, can you come back? We got a problem. And Bill and I, no more than that, got the car, drove over, and as we came around the corner to where the workshop was, because there were some studio modelers who were adding little bits and pieces to the model as it was actually being fitted onto the stage. Just little bits and pieces were needed. And as we came around the corner, one of the greenhouses that we'd made in mirrored perspex was lying on the ground in 1,000 pieces. Apparently, Peter had decided that the whole refinery was much too dark. So he had each section, and bear in mind that a lot of the detailing was done with paintwork. He had it sprayed white. The whole model sprayed white. The whole refinery sprayed white with a car spray gun. We'd used an airbrush. And, I mean, we just saw our detail had just disappeared under an 1/8 inch or 3 or 4 mil of paint. So we weren't very happy about that, but, you know, we'd been paid, and some people say, you know, that's enough, but for me, it wasn't really, and I don't think Bill was very happy either. You know, we really felt that they'd made a real mess of it, you know. But luckily, with the shuttle, John Steers said it'd be nice if you gave it a bit of just a hint of colour, and we had this idea. He said somebody mentioned yellow, and it was weird because Nostromo had originally been yellow. And so we just dusted it with a very, very, very soft, a lot of lacquer and very little paint. We just gave it this very, very soft matte dusting of yellow over the shuttle, and that's the colour it actually was. But in the film, you can't see the colour of it anyway. You mostly see it in silhouette, which is a real shame.